Let's get more from SABC News correspondent Rosie Birchard. Rosie, before we even get to this particular meeting, we are seeing reports that suggest that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he had signed an official request for Ukraine to join the EU. I wonder if you're hearing the same thing?
Well, I can confirm that he has indeed signed that paper. I've just spoken to one diplomat on that. However, what is really far from being confirmed is what the prospects are for that membership actually coming in any time in the near future. What happens next is that membership application goes to EU member states and they have to decide unanimously, so among 27, on how to proceed. Then it would go to the bloc's executive to be analysed further. And just to give you a bit of context here, North Macedonia, for example, has been a candidate country for EU membership since 2005. So these are generally not processes which move quickly. However, it must be said, in the last few days, we've seen real major U-turns on EU policy, particularly on defence policy. We've seen the European Union for the first time agreeing to provide a country with lethal weapons, that country, of course, being Ukraine. So at this stage, it seems that even we can't rule anything out, despite the fact that if you look at historical precedent, it seems that it's very unlikely such a membership request could be treated in any short period of time.
It'll be interesting to see, because I see he's hoping to gain some, immediate membership. But as you say, it could be quite a long line, of waiting there. But let's talk about this meeting of European defence as well as energy ministers. What was it about?
Well, that meeting of EU defence ministers followed up from yesterday when foreign ministers took the unprecedented decision to provide Ukraine with lethal weapons. That's something that has never been done in the bloc before. They've set aside around €500 million to try and help support Ukraine and particularly Ukrainians forces. So they were following up on that today to try and hash out the details of how those weapons could actually be provided. That is still quite mysterious. We asked specifically to the bloc's top diplomat, how would those weapons reach Ukraine? There are several land borders between Ukraine and the European Union, including Poland, for example, but he would not be drawn on that. He specifically said, well, that's information that Moscow would very much like to have, so that he wouldn't, in that case, share it with us as journalists. So some questions remain there, but it is true to say that this seems to be a real never-before-seen measure in European Union terms. They're really trying to take a step forward here to show their support to Ukraine. And this is something we can imagine that Russia would perceive as inflammatory, but that is not something the EU seems concerned about at all. They condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine. They say this is a flagrant violation of international law.
And Rosie, I'd like to stay with, developments from around Poland. We saw on social media some, African nationals saying that they're not being allowed to get in to, through Poland. I wonder if that is also forming part of some of the concerns for the EU.
That is really a major concern, and we did hear a reference to such reports today from the European Commissioner for Home Affairs, Ylva Johansson. She was not in Poland, but rather in Romania, which also shares a border with Ukraine. And she said very clearly that she wants to ensure that all people who are in Ukraine can get out safely. Now, she doesn't the extent to which she has an influence on that border crossing is questionable, is limited, but there certainly is. And there was an acknowledgement of that there from the European Union side. And I think it's important to note that while we've seen a real swelling of support from some of these frontline countries, for example, Poland, of people, locals driving towards the border to offer support, to offer food, to offer transport back to other cities, some of these countries have also been criticised by the bloc's top court in the past for not taking in what the EU says was their fair share of refugees from other conflicts. So, for example, that was the case with refugees from Syria and Iraq. So we will see, for example, in the coming days, we're expecting some more news from the EU in terms of how it plans to accept many more asylum applications, but there might be some reticence from some countries on how long-term these changes in asylum policy should be.
All right, we'll continue to monitor these developments closely. Thanks so much for that. So that was SABC News correspondent Rosie Birchard coming to us live from Brussels.